There's always a way around it.
Okay, good evening everyone and welcome to Thursday's online seminar. Tonight it's the property roundup with the topic of getting back to work, and I'll be handing over to Michael Shapiro, who's going to be introducing us to our very distinguished panel this evening. As always, during the event, the questions that might occur to you that you'd like to ask the panel, if you'd like to use either the chat or the Q&A toolbar at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions, and we will put these to the panel at the end. So without any further ado, Michael, I'll hand over to you.
Welcome everyone. This is a live broadcast from the City of London, where our theme this evening is getting back to work. Someone said in a recent webinar that I attended that work was something you did rather than somewhere you went to. But now it seems the opposite has happened. But the theme of this evening is getting back to work in the city. In fact, I've now started coming in a couple of days a week. And I feel a bit like a WFH exiteer rather than the Remainer that I will admit that I am. This is not quite the usual property team quarterly legal update. The main bonus is there's no law. So over the last year, we've been through a lot. We've had rent holidays, break clauses, dilapidations, deeds of variation, and assuming you've got through that lot, today we're looking at how to go forward. I was spurred on to organise this webinar by a website called London Love Affair, which is being supported by the City of London and the Chamber of Commerce, amongst others. And I would urge everybody to look at the website and do what you can to support London getting back to work. The world of commercial property has moved on in the last couple of months. And just a couple of highlights. The Deloitte Crane survey published last week showed 32 new projects in London from October to March, which is a 20% increase on last year. And my colleagues in our construction team tell me that the workload is getting even larger. A lot of my clients are doing office refurbishments at the moment, primarily for when everybody returns. The hospitality industry, which has given rise to concern, has now had a month of outdoors, even in this weather, and it's day 4 of being indoors. There's still obviously a long way down statistics-wise on the same period from 2019, but I heard on the news this morning that recruitment is growing and there is now actually a shortage of staff in the industry. So working from home, some of us are now doing at least one day a week, if not more, but I still find walking around the city today at lunchtime quite sad. I miss the lunchtime bustle, although the man in my local sandwich bar tells me that he's getting a little more trade each day. There are some accountancy firms that are allowing staff to work where they want, but KPMG, flying the flag, says that for 4 days a fortnight, they'd like their staff to come in. The retail trade, Land Securities in their annual report said there's been a strong recovery since April, but they expect a string of retailer insolvencies when government support finally ends. My view is that the economic stimulus should not be withdrawn too soon. Interesting news in today's paper, Great Portland Estates are intending to commence 4 large office developments within the next year. So the Times headline of a speedy recovery expected after the economy defies lockdown gloom actually has turned out to be correct. GDP has risen 2.1% month on month over the last month, and it's anticipated to grow to 3 to 3.5% in Q2. Now, I'm delighted to introduce the panel, and firstly, I'm particularly pleased to welcome the Joint Sheriff of London, Christopher Hayward. Chris took office as Sheriff on the 27th of September 2019. He is co-sheriff with Michael Manelli, and together they share responsible for the smooth running of the Central Criminal Court and for the provision of facilities for Her Majesty's judges to administer justice there. His principal duties are to support the Lord Mayor on visits and official functions during his year of office, and he's been doing a lot of Zoom travelling around the world. And Chris also represents the Lord Mayor at many other events. His business experience extends to infrastructure, planning and strategic communications sectors, but he's now very well known for his work within the City of London. He became a common councillor for the ward of Broad Street 8 years ago, and he has been the chairman of the city's Planning and Transportation Committee. The skyline of London, the city, has rapidly changed over the last decade, and it owes much to Chris's dynamic chairmanship of that committee. Chris is also one of those people who never says no, even down to losing weight in aid of his favourite recorder and sheriff's charity. And he's involved in very, very many voluntary organisations. So welcome, Chris. And my next guest is sitting with me, Richard Burge. Richard has been the Chief Executive of the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry since February 2020. And I know Richard fairly well, and he's someone who genuinely wants to help people to achieve their potential. He's worked in over 55 countries, and he has been Chief Executive of the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, Chief Executive of Wilton Park, Chief Executive of the Countryside Allowance, and Director General of the Zoological Society of London. And most importantly, he is a fellow member with me of the Worshipful Company of World Traders. He has spearheaded the Chamber of Commerce's response to the pandemic with a great series which is continuing of webinars which really helped us members to understand how we could run our businesses and not to feel alone. He also got networking events going, including my first experience of being at a networking event and moving around the room without leaving my desk. So welcome to Rich. Our third guest is Gles Fuchs, who is Chief Executive of Office Space in Town. And at the moment we are sitting in one of Giles's buildings, St Dunstan's Hill at Monument, where my firm, Silver Law, is a licensee. Giles is very proud that he left school with virtually no A&O levels, but he entered the University of Life immediately by taking a job as an estate agent. By the age of 21, Giles had opened his own estate agency in Northampton, and he's now a self-confessed serial entrepreneur. He started many other businesses, and as he says, he's made a few bad mistakes, but he's learned a lot of good lessons along the way. He joined forces with his sister Nikki 12 years ago to set up Office Space in Town, and he is the very proud Chief Executive of that successful and growing serviced office group. For the second time, I'm his licensee, this time in Monument. And after this event, Richard and I are looking forward to going to the rooftop bar to admire the views of London. Giles has a particular emphasis and pride in giving a fantastic service to his clients, which is largely due to his excellent staff. Giles is also involved in a drinks business, which he tells me for making mocktails, and he said it's an adults-only soft drink, whatever that may mean. And many of you may have seen Giles recently on television, where as the owner of the hotel on Burge Island, he was interviewed in a documentary about Agatha Christie. So thank you, Giles, for joining us. And then finally, a big welcome to my colleague Shafiara Muttalib-Mehra. Shafiara joined Silver Shemmings Ash, as it then was, in 2019 as Head of Strategy and Projects, following a grueling interview with me. She's an experienced strategic leader and has over 15 years' experience leading cross-organisational transformation programmes in both the private and public sector. She has a wealth of experience in the area of cultural change, transformation, delivery, continuous improvement, and effective performance management. She looked on the pandemic as a challenge for us as a law firm, and she's now going to tell you how she transformed the firm, perhaps rather more rapidly than we expected. So welcome, Shafiara. Thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I mean, it sounds slightly odd saying there was a success, that we had some successes because of COVID, but one of them for us was it enabled us to do things that we'd considered but didn't think we as a traditional law firm could do. And one of those was introducing hybrid working. So like many firms or many organisations, we will not move to 100% remote working, but having now realising that we can work just as effectively from home, we've introduced hybrid working, which basically in our firm means that our staff can actually choose when to come into the office or when to work from home. You know, everyone's been working from home for the past 12 months quite effectively, and we don't currently have any roles which cannot be done at home. You know, there's lots of advantages as well for an employee to work from home, main one being a work-life balance, saving time on travel and cost of travel. What we've also realised, especially with our lawyers actually prefer to work from home. So what that's enabled us to do is change our model from being a traditional law firm to now actually taking on more consultants. So 60% of our team are now actually consultants, and that's a 40% increase. So it's a fee sharing arrangement, less of a risk for us as a business as well. And with having more people having a more dispersed workforce, what that's enabled us to do is relook at our actual workspace. Now, previously we were in a office space in central London, in the city of London, very close to the Gherkin. Our ambitions were very much to take on a larger office space, but with everyone working effectively from home, it's actually enabled us to reduce our office space and move into serviced offices, which is something the senior partner was very much against even 12 months ago. So it's been quite a learning curve for us as an organisation, but we've seen actually, as our staff don't want to necessarily all work in the office full time, we don't need that space. We've moved into some really lovely office spaces in the City of London, serviced offices, which will support us as we grow. And also, if we change our model again, it will support us. It's a slightly different approach so that everyone doesn't have a desk. We've introduced hot desking. We've allowed people can book a desk when they come in. And if they don't want a desk, that's fine. There's lots of areas within the building that we're in, which allows people to collaborate informally and have informal discussions. So we've very much changed from the traditional firm that we were 12 months ago to a modern law firm.
Thank you very much, Shafiara. And there will be an opportunity at the end to ask questions, and there may well be questions already come into the box. Now, I'm very pleased now to ask Chris if he would let us have his thoughts and observations on getting back to work in the city. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Michael. Can I say what a pleasure it is to be invited to be on your panel this evening, and I greet you from the Old Bailey, where I live as one of the two sheriffs. I want to talk about what I think is the resilient City of London. And I think we are resilient, and I think we will return to work. But as Shapiro said, actually probably in a slightly different way to the way we've probably done in the past. And I think a lot about returning to work is about the word confidence. And confidence comes in lots and lots of ways. First of all, let me just give you a couple of statistics, which I think are quite interesting about the square mile. The first is this, that in April of last year, which you'll recall was the very first month of total lockdown in April, full month, our planning department, city planning department, handled more pre-application discussions with global investors and global developers than we had done in the whole of the previous 5 years. Now, what does that say to me? It says that's a real vote of confidence, huge global confidence in the future of the City of London. And those inquiries translated themselves into planning applications. Between January of this year and today, we have already given 80% of the consents that we gave over the whole of last year for tall buildings. So there's a lot of investment going into potentially tall buildings, but those tall buildings look different to what they did before. And as Shapiro was talking about, they're not so much about permanent desk arrangements, they're much more about collaborative working spaces, and actually people wanting to be more spaced out than they were historically in the old office accommodation. The other issue I think about returning to work is transport and confidence in public transport. And we know that there has been, throughout the pandemic, real problems in people not wanting to get on trains, not wanting to get on buses, not wanting to get on the tube. And TfL has faced a crisis. It has no money. It is reliant on the government refunding it, refinancing it. But the good news is that all the studies that TfL have done, and they're published on infections on the underground, for example, are that they are not finding COVID being transmissible on the actual trains themselves. So we need to build more confidence in people coming back into the city. And I went out today with the Lord Mayor on 2 or 3 visits, and actually I thought the city was busier than I've seen it actually in the past. And if you read the Evening Standard today, they are saying that office occupancy is back up to 54% today. Now that may not be exclusively in the city, but if it is 54%, that is the highest it has been since the beginning of the pandemic. So I think we will see hybrid working going forward. I think people will probably want to work maybe 3 days a week in the city and take 2 days working from home. But that's not new. I would actually argue that people were already starting to work 1 day a week from home, often before the pandemic. So what the pandemic has done is has accelerated a changing trend in working practices, which had already started pre-pandemic. So I think for young people in particular, they want to get back more than actually the older generation, because if you're in a house share on the outskirts of outer London, maybe your office at the moment is sitting on the end of your single bed in your bedroom with a laptop balanced on your knee. That's not really what young people want. They want to be part of a collaborative environment, face-to-face, sharing ideas and learning. So I think they are the ones who will lead us back. So I conclude on my point that the office is not dead. It's a new reincarnation of the office, and one that we should embrace enthusiastically.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. And now I'm going to hand over to Richard for his observations.
Thank you. And I'd just like to say, I think Chris is in the most glamorous bedsit possible in London. And I want Chris to actually find a photo of his bedsit when he was a student. So I'd just like to compare and contrast. I think we should all indulge in this. I'm just a couple of things to add. I don't think I'm a sunlit, optimist, but I do believe in sunlit uplands because in the end, no matter how dark it gets, there's always a sunlit upland, and we tend to get there in the end. So I think a couple of things. First of all, I think in terms of hybrid working, all of us who are managers and business leaders are going to have to get used to something I think which is really exciting, which is personalized working patterns. There will not be a standard working pattern for your office. There will not be a standard working pattern for a particular type of job. It'll be based upon the needs of the individual in terms of the work they have to do, the team they are part of, and their own personal well-being. And I think that is hugely exciting. So number one, personalized working patterns. Second thing is, I think we've got to get really adapted. And I think this is going to play particularly to the ecosystem of central London, which is people are not going to come in on particular days of the week. I think they're going to come in when they need to do collaborative work. And the chances are they will stay longer than they were planning to because they can go and do other things. So my feeling is that instead of thinking about the working week, we should be thinking about the working 19 days. I would recommend choose a prime number of working days. And the advantage of that means that every time the cycle restarts, you'll be starting on a new day of the week. So over a pattern of cycles, people will be in on every day of the week. And over that pattern of cycles, they'll meet new colleagues during that week. It'll be far more exciting. So don't talk about the week, choose a prime number of working days and work on that basis. And then I think the final thing is I believe we should be recognizing that we're moving much more importantly to a world of work where finally we're going to recognize people are doing their job because of what they produce rather than seeing their head, the back of their head looking at a TV screen. That is not the way we do it. I've spent a lot of my life working in various branches of the Foreign Office. I've spent 10 years running Wilton Park, which is a Foreign Office agency. The fact is, most people in the British Foreign Office work remotely. They work in other countries. Frankly, nobody, Foreign Secretary or anyone, has the vaguest idea whether they're doing their job. They have a fairly good idea they're tucking into the Ferrero Rocher and sucking back the wine. But frankly, they have no idea. Unless an army crosses a border, they know things have not gone well for that ambassador. If an army doesn't cross a border, then things must be going okay. So it's about productivity. It's about what you produce. And I think in the end, that's going to be such an exciting thing. We're going to manage and relate to people because of what they do rather than where they're sitting. And they choose where they're sitting in order to maximize their own productivity and maximize their well-being. So in the middle of all this, I think particularly for the City of London, and Chris, this is going to be down to you, we really have to make the City of London a much more diverse ecosystem. Frankly, the fact that there is not a single jazz bar in the City of London is a disgrace. And this is something I aim to rectify with your help, Sheriff. Over to you.
Thank you, and we'll look forward to coming round to the chamber for the jazz bar. And now, if I can ask Giles to let us have his observations, please.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for inviting me to your panel. Couple of points. Hospitality, as you mentioned, we own Burr Island Hotel down in lovely Devon. And although I can tell you that we are 100% full until November, and we expect that November and December, which aren't yet full, by the way, anyone, we think will be. The issue, without doubt, is that hospitality has lost a lot of its workers. This is just a quick aside. We furloughed our staff and we looked after them, many of whom were from abroad. At the end of furlough, they called and said, we're not coming back. We're with our family and we're going to stay in Greece. So that was the first thing. And the second thing is that a lot of people in hospitality realized they didn't have to work until 2 o'clock in the morning when they could stack shelves in Morrison's at the same price. So it has, I have to tell you, we have 62 staff down there and we were 15 short when we opened on Monday. We're now only 8 short, but it's pretty dire in the hospitality. There are places not opening. So I just wanted to deal with that bit. You'll have to excuse me, but actually unashamedly, you will hear me being self-serving, given that I do run serviced office space in London. It is my view, we are a herd animal. We went from the savannah, wandering around aimlessly, to hamlets, to villages, to towns, to cities, to metropolises. We like to be together. So I believe that although we have had to go home, we will come back to London. There is no doubt in my mind. Our experience was pretty dire. So a hospitality on one side and office space in London on the other. It's been a wonderful year. We were 93% occupied, which is optimal for us, back in March last year. And that fell to just over 50%, 54% at its worst case, which is last month. And of those clients, only about 1% were actually coming into the office. I mean, this is all kind of hot off the press. That is now with us at about 35%. So it's moved really, really quickly. I think the direction of travel has changed in the last 4 weeks. But I tell you that we have about 2,500 to 3,000 desks in London. And last 4 weeks, we've sold 166. So given that we sold a handful the previous year, you can see how quickly they're coming back. And of course, those people who are coming back, they went home. They didn't go somewhere else. And now they're going, oh my word, we need an office. But it is changing. It is changing. And we've come up with a product called Adjust. And Adjust is have an office for a day a week, or 2 days a week, or 3 days a week, rather than, and of course that saves them money, but it allows them to both save money and come to the office for meetings, which are very important. Going to that self-serving bit, we need human interaction, and we're going to get it. And I think if we don't get human interaction, we get ill, mentally ill. And we've had to support a lot of our staff to feel good about themselves because they've been on their own, not seeing anyone. As was mentioned, working on a bed. You know, these are people working from one-bedroom flats in London. That is not healthy. So I think the human interaction is a key part to mental health. The office is much more than somewhere you work. It's somewhere you meet people. 15% of people, so the internet tells me, meet their wife there. Apparently many more meet, no, it's something else. But if you're not in the office, it seems to me very difficult to train and educate your staff effectively. I know that my girls who have been they're at school and university doing their online training have found it much more difficult to concentrate for that period of time and the interaction on a Zoom call than it is to be in a classroom. And I think that absolutely follows through in the workplace. Mentoring. I hear, and again, I hear people saying, well, I can do my job well at home. You might be able to do your job well at home. Some jobs can be done in the quietness of your study or office at home. But those people who aren't yet at that point need your training. They need your mentorship. And that is happening when you are working from home. My brother-in-law says about my sister in the same fashion. He says, yes, it's all organised fun with Mickey. So the fun is all organised, but it isn't really fun then, is it? It's a bit like that nuanced conversation that you have to get on the Zoom to prepare. And before we came on here, Michael, with all due respect, you were rushing around trying to get things on it. That organised fun or training isn't the same as it happening automatically. We bond at work. We bond because after work, we go to the pub or we do sport or we do dinner. And that creates a much better team. If you took 8 people and put them in a rowing boat, one behind the other, and said, row as quick as you can, they would not be going as quickly as 8 people you put in a boat who did it for 6 months consecutively together. It must be true that people working together are more effective than people not working together. Share. I was in London today. In fact, I was in Mayfair. I started in Monument and then I went to Mayfair today. I was just sitting at my desk doing some work, making some notes, and I heard a conversation going on. And I knew that I had knowledge that could help that conversation. I wasn't asked to input, but after that conversation, I went up to my member of staff and said, I think this might help. And it did help. That can't happen when you are working at home. And I'm sure as lawyers, that must happen all the time, especially because I know, Michael, you and I have done some seriously difficult work together, and there was a lot of conferring and triumphing, wasn't there, to get to that point. Leadership. You can't lead from your office at home when all your staff are elsewhere. I mean, you can, but you can't imagine the brigadier in his ivory tower trying to run his troops. It doesn't work as effectively. I'm kind of going on a bit, so I might kind of change tack just a little bit. I do believe that those companies who say we're just going to work from home because it's cheaper and we can do our job, and they're missing out on all the things I've mentioned, they will suffer. I am absolutely convinced of it. I think they will not. So graduate, Oxbridge graduate, first degree honour, comes for an interview and says, Mr. Fuchs, I'd really like a job with you. And I go, you're a wonderful, wonderful person. And we'd like to give you a job. We'd like you to start straight away. Well, as soon as you get home. I think the graduate wants to be in an environment with his comrades and friends and colleagues and to meet people. And I think if those companies who are sending them home will miss out on the good candidates. I think also, I'm almost finished, Michael. Well, I do have another page, but I feel as though it's probably not my turn anymore. But people have short memories. I think we know about short memories after 5/11 or 9/11 or 5/7, 9/11, the London Bridge bombings, the IRA bombings. There was always talk then that no one would ever come into town again, no one would get on a train, and they did very quickly. We're a robust species, and I think with COVID and the scare that it's given us, I think that will fade, and I'm going to say very shortly, people will be back in the office much as they were before, but on a much more, and I like hybrid working was a good phrase, Shafiara, I think you mentioned, like the hybrid working, that will happen. People will be working more at home, but they must, and anyone listening out there, you must insist, I think, that your staff come into the office regularly to mix with the rest of the team.
Thank you. So we all seem to be saying much the same thing, which is good. Now, I know we had a couple of pre-submitted questions. So Julie, if you would like to start on the questions, and then we'll see what's in the chat.
Indeed. Someone's asked, how will transport, both public and private, fit into the future plans of the city?
Want me to answer that one from the city perspective? First of all, so when I became chairman of planning and transportation, the first thing I said to the city officers was, can I have a look at our transport strategy? And they looked at me very blankly, and it soon became very clear we don't have a transport strategy for the City of London. So the first thing I did was to get one written. And I said, I don't want it to be about motherhood and apple pie. It's got to be radical. It's got to be progressive. It's got to calculate new modes of transport going forward. The truth in the City of London is that we don't have much car parking availability. You know, we had 513,000 commuters pre-pandemic a day, and we have total 3,500 car parking spaces on street and off street in the square mile. So our transport strategy for the future focuses on two things. It focuses on the pedestrian and it focuses on cycling. We don't allow planning consents to put in car parking spaces anymore in the city, but they do have to put in cycling provision. And that's a major change for us. So I think our view is, you know, there's nowhere really in the square mile you can't actually walk to once you're actually in the square mile. So we are also conscious about air quality, and part of our climate action strategy is to improve air quality. And since I was the guy who had to close Bank Junction to traffic when I was chairman of transportation and during the weekdays because of safety. And since then, our air quality has risen. And we all know that bad air quality is a hidden killer. You know, it kills people. It's as simple as that. So we have to address that as well. So we I think, have got a fairly progressive, dynamic transport strategy for the city going forward.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to say anything about transport?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I think the government's announcement today on flexible ticketing has been really innovative. I have to say, I prepared a press release to actually have a go at them, and I had to tear it up, which is quite distressing, because I agreed with them. And the idea is that a week in advance, you can buy a ticket which lasts for 28 days and gives you over that 28 days 8 return trips on your normal commuting trip, which means you can supplement it with others as you go along. I think that's hugely innovative. It enables people to be flexible. And I think the consequence of that is people will come in more rather than less. If they were restricted and said, no, you can't do this, it's once a week, they'd only come in once a week. But if they know they've got that 8 days, they will come in and they may supplement it. So I think that's very exciting. And going back to something that Giles says, I'm very interested in what Giles is thinking now about the nature of the space he provides. And are you looking, Giles, at particularly looking at the possibility of changing that so it's much more interactive? So rather than people sitting at a desk, they actually have much more interactive space. It's a bit like university libraries. If you go into them now, they are, sorry, it's a slightly off-piste, I'm sorry. If you go to university libraries now, they're not single, you know, where you put your head down and read books. They're much more interactive because students are working on joint projects together. They need that space to work together. So libraries in universities have become really very different to, you know, to my day. So I think there are things to be learned. But just to go back to the transport situation, the more flexibility we can give people, I think the more they will come in. And particularly night transport, because frankly, you can come in at 11 o'clock and then you won't feel you're in for 3 days. You'll say, well, actually, normally every day I go home straight away and, go back to my mother's loft or wherever you live. You'll say, no, I'm actually going to stay in and have a few beers. And I'm in 3 days this week, so I'll stay in and I'll go to a show and I'll go to a jazz bar, Chris. I'll become more part of the environment and the ecosystem I'm in and stay longer and use it more. And because I'm spending less money on transport, I've got more money to spend on hospitality.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Julie, the next question, please.
Okay, I think this is probably for you and Shafiara. Can lawyers be as effective working from home, or are they more effective when working together in the office?
Are they effective?
I think, I think in terms of, obviously Michael can talk from a personal point of view, but the short answer is yes, they can work as effectively from home for as long as they've got, robust internet connections so that the connectivity doesn't drop off, and they can easily check their speed and the stability of their Wi-Fi connection. And the second thing that they need is really access to files. So as long as they're using, a system which allows them to scan documents and access their files using a cloud-based solution, they can work collaboratively on documents, whether it's with their colleagues or with a client. And obviously, the collaboration tools that we have now, like Zoom or MS Teams, allows us to have those face-to-face interactions as well. What we're missing is the element that Giles referred to, is the ability to build relationships, to network, to have that team spirit. Both Chris and Giles and Richard have all said the same thing. And that's the bit that's missing. And to work effectively as a team, you do need that face-to-face interaction and going into the office. And I certainly think that the model that we've introduced at Silver Law, being the hybrid model, gives people that flexibility to go in the days that they need to work collaboratively, and work from home the other days. And equally, Richard, we don't have a 9-to-5 model anymore. It's very much a case of people working the hours that suit them. And I think, like a lot of companies and firms out there, we probably find that people work actually longer hours, and we have to remind people, you need to take a break. You need to have some time away from the screen. And there is a big concern for us as a firm, with people's mental well-being, working from home and not actually leaving the house. And, we have to constantly remind people, dress appropriately, treat it as a working day, but step away. Don't stay onto your screens at 9 o'clock. Whereas if you're in the office, there's that interaction. And yes, you might go for a drink after work, or perhaps at the end of the day, like Michael's having now.
Yeah.
I agree, obviously, with you, Shafi, but there's one thing that I feel is very important and that I'm sorry has been lacking in the last year, and that is the older ones amongst us can actually be a good example for the younger ones, particularly how to deal with clients in meetings, how to deal with clients on the telephone, and just by looking and being in a meeting with us or sitting on the desk opposite, they can hear us. And that's something that is impossible to be taught in any other way other than in the real world. And the second thing is, when I have a query and I had to bounce something off one of our more junior members of staff today, because it was something I know he's done a lot of. I had to email him, I then had to scan in the page of the document, he had to reply. Whereas if we were in the same room together, we'd just walk round and I'd spend 5 minutes with him. And also team meetings are all right on Microsoft Teams, but at the end of the day, I have said to everybody, if we can do our once a month departmental meeting live, and everybody could come in on the same day, and we can sit out in the lounge there and then go for a drink after, so there's some incentive and purpose for people coming in, that would be great, because you suddenly remember things after the meeting's over that you wished you'd said. Whereas if you're all round a table, it's so much better, and I think it's better for everybody. So, as you know, I'm very much in favour of the hybrid working, but I would like people to get back together for periods, because it's a great way for us to pass on our experience and knowledge, and we can learn. I've learned a lot from some of my younger colleagues as well.
Okay. Someone's saying, do the panel think that people just find it easier to just slip back into the pre-March 2020 ways of working? Do we think that will happen?
Giles?
Okay. That was said with a particular bent, wasn't it, Julie? Slip back into that way of working. Well, they might slip back in, it might be a good way of working. Just quickly, I think they will. I think, but they will also work at home. I think my work pattern will probably be one day at home and the rest in London. Although we do have an office, I don't go to an office. My life is in a rucksack, and I go from space to space, meeting with my staff and all clients, talking about what's going on. Can I just come back to Richard? You asked a question about the slip, well, kind of slipping back, but the change and what office space is going to look like. Proudly, as I think Michael said several times, we changed the layout of offices, serviced offices, back in 2012. And what we decided, or what we saw was people wanting much more space. They needed the private office. You can't discussing, I don't know whether Silver Law probably do divorce, but you can't be discussing someone's private affairs in an open auditorium. You need to have somewhere that's private and safe, and and if you're a tech company, somewhere where you protect your IP. But on the other hand, you need breakout space where you can have conversations in a relaxed environment. And our buildings, would you believe, although we are a serviced office and every foot counts, every square foot counts, only 65% are offices. 35% are breakout space, cafes, and talking about changing environment. In the building you're sitting in, we have a hairdressers and nail bar, and there are bedrooms, and there's a rooftop bar and restaurant. So I think they are changing. I think Chris said, I think they've been changing for some time now. I think it's just been exacerbated by COVID. I wrote a paper in 2014 saying that flexible workspace will be probably 30% of office space occupation by 2025. Now, I might have got that. Actually, it might be, COVID may have helped me being right. But at that point, when I wrote it was only about 7% of space was flexible, maybe a touch less. We're now up 15 and probably end up, because of necessity, being at 20 by the end of this year. And so maybe 30% is realistic by 2025. So I think it is changing, has changed.
Yeah.
I want to know why I'm not sitting in the restaurant or the bar and sitting in the meeting room. It's a lovely meeting room. But
well, I think Michael's going to take you upstairs later. Oh.
It's interesting that a lot of my clients in the last year have obtained, tenant clients have obtained landlord's consent, and vice versa. Landlords have asked me to produce the documentation for altering their floor plate, and they've got rid of a lot of the cell offices that the MD will have had his own little room, etc., to create much more open plan working. And I think that the days of people saying that's my office are probably gone. I mean, people do need to have offices, or at least the use of a room, but generally speaking, having been in open plan working now for 17 years, it works very well. I was a bit skeptical many years in 2005, but when we did it, but now I think it's great, and everybody respects everybody else. You know, people wear headsets for phone calls and Zooms. People don't shout across the room, they walk across, and it all works out really well. And then you can speak to people. You see somebody going for a coffee and you think, oh, I haven't seen that person for a week. I'll go make myself a coffee as well. And it just provides much more of a collaborative atmosphere.
Interesting, Michael. So do you remember, wasn't that many years ago, people talked about ivory tower management? Do you remember ivory towers? Surely, and then that kind of changed and went open plan. Surely working from home and trying to manage is the absolute ivory tower that someone's sitting in.
I think, Giles, you're absolutely right, and it gets even more extreme because you've mentioned this. You know, it's fine for the manager. They go home to their home in Sussex and they've got their own study and they've got their Labrador underneath the desk and all this stuff. And yet their staff are sitting there, 4 people around the table, sharing a broadband connection. And life has been really bad. And I've got staff for whom life has been really grim in that period. And I think there's a way of, you know, creating hybrid working for them, but which actually makes their working lives far happier, far happier.
Chris, as a matter of interest, you may or may not know, in the planning applications you're getting at the moment for office space, does it go into the detail of whether there's cells or whether it's open plan?
Yeah, it does broadly, and it's open plan is the simple answer, Michael. Yes, there are meeting rooms, there are conferencing facilities, but there's mainly hot desking and mainly open plan. And we have seen, you know, in Giles's section, we've seen a huge growth in the serviced office provision in the city. I mean, I suppose the most notable are WeWork. And I mean, WeWork came to me and simply said, Chris, any building you can find us, we'll take. So, you know, there's a change. There's a change happening, as Giles rightly says.
Chris, can I ask you a question? I mean, I realise Michael used the word cells, which means something different for you, as sheriff. But I'm just asking, one of the things you mentioned to me, I remember a few weeks ago, is about the way people, it's not just about the nature of space and open space, it's about the way they use it and the nature of density and how people are starting to think about the, if you like, the productivity of their space. It'd be quite interesting, I think, for everyone to hear you talk about that.
I mean, I really do think that's happening. I mean, first of all, people want more light, natural light. They want more natural ventilation. That's going to be hugely important post-COVID. And they certainly want more informal collaborative space where they can sit almost in lounge-like conditions. Does that make sense? Yeah. To actually increase their collaboration. So the other thing we found on the planning side is that buildings have to be much more flexible than they used to be, because the days when one big corporation came and took one big tower in the square mile have gone. You know, 90-something% of our businesses in the square mile are SMEs now. And a lot of them want not just even a floor plate, they want a corner of a floor plate. So the flexibility of design has become really, really very different. Just in my 5 years of looking after planning in the city, we've seen a real change in that as well.
Interesting.
Okay. That seems to be the end of our questions, unless there are any more coming in from the floor, which it doesn't appear to be. So it just remains for me to thank our very distinguished panel for your really interesting contributions. I've sat here listening with great anticipation to the answers that have come through. Thank you to Michael for hosting, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you to everyone for attending. So it just remains to say thank you again and good evening, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Yeah, this is when we go up to the bar upstairs. Chris goes to his Old Bailey appointment, and Giles goes back to work.
Enjoy it all, gentlemen and ladies.
Thank you all very much for both those people who have attended. I know we get a lot of hits at other times when this is recorded and put on our website, but a big thank you must go to Chris, Giles, Richard and Shafiara, and of course also to Julie for facilitating this, and to Richard for trying to sort my IT out, which Mr. Gates will be hearing about. And everybody, thank you very much for attending and take care. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.